welcome. It's me, Percita, and this is Percita's Paradox. So here we are, February, Black History Month, very special month for people like myself. It is African American History, Black History Month, so make sure you find someone of African American descent and give them some special love. Outside of that, speaking of love, it is also Valentine's Day season. And this is a time where we really get caught up in a lot of what love is. So what I thought would be very fun would to actually be to start a series. And what our series is going to be in regards to is just trauma and love and how the two interact and how they also can actually overwork themselves within relationships. And what I mean by what I'm saying is that we continuously in our society have had plethora of conversations about distancing ourselves from toxic people and toxic people in general and what they are and narcissists and all those things. But what I want to do is to actually talk more about the relationship and the interaction with toxic, not necessarily the person. Because let's be perfectly honest, like there is no such thing as 100% toxic person. There's always going to be some good in everyone, right? I mean, that's just common sense. We all have some sense of toxicity to us. So it is pretty insane to say that any one person is just completely toxic. Now, I'm sure someone will go, girl, you have no idea. I know so-and-so and they are just straight evil. And that may be true. But let's just say, for the sake of not arguing, we agree that there is some good in everyone, right? The capacity for good is in everyone. It's just a matter of choice. So instead of really talking about distancing ourselves from toxic people, let's start our series by just talking specifically about toxic relationships. And what we're going to do is try to break those toxic relationships and interactions down by categories. And the first category that we are going to talk about today is the spoken and unspoken word of a person. And what I mean by that is there is a lot of emphasis that goes into what a person is saying to you. And sometimes we don't really recognize that we are all looking for a place of being safe. But toxic has a way of really making its way in through words. And what I mean by the fact that everything happens through words when it comes to toxic to start is you really have to not only think about the words that are being spoken to you, but you have to think about the words that are unspoken, right? So let's specifically talk about the person who uses those words to re-traumatize you. And what I mean by that is the person who uses the words to manipulate or to cause you to feel guilty is the first type of person that we're going to talk about. And again, we're talking about the person, but we're talking about specifically the relationship with that type of person. So the interaction. And you have to understand that sometimes you don't realize that multiple interactions with someone, even when you realize it may be your boss, it could be someone at your church, it could be a friend, that interaction, once you've started to have multiple interactions with this person, it is now a relationship. And that is what we are talking about today, that energy between that relationship. What we don't know is that we do not pay attention to just what is happening with the words that are coming out of our mouths and the words that we allow to be spoken over us. So you might say, well, how exactly do you control that, Percita? I mean, think about the relationships that you have and just actually try to see if you can pinpoint the individual in that relationship that actually speaks to you in a manner that causes you to feel guilty about something instead of actually giving you a place of safety. And what I mean by that is typically because we are talking about the fact that everyone has some sense of good in them, think about the person who is always in a position of feeling as if it's not them. Like they never ever want to own anything. They continuously tell you that the words that are being spoken to them are always negative and they're always in a place that they have to basically respond back negative because no one really wants to believe in them and they have no one. and so on and so forth. That person is the person that we're discussing in regards to your interaction with them, because that person's toxic in that particular case causes you to not be able to move based on the fact that you do not want to speak the words you need to speak to them to make the situation better, or to actually give them clarity on what it is that they're saying. So that interaction becomes crazy because they put you in a position where you actually cannot speak the words that you need to speak for your own sense of safety. And you might say, well, what does safety have to do with it? Well, think about it. If you do not feel safe within a relationship or an interaction, it causes you to re-traumatize yourself in some way that allowed that toxic mannerism to attach itself to something that's already happened to you. So let's just say that the person can actually then use words, and those words that they're particularly using cause you to feel as if you don't want to leave them alone. Or you're all they have, and there's nothing that they can do about the words because that's just who they are, or how they characterize who they are. I mean, do understand that words, spoken or unspoken, are the active ingredient of all toxic relationships. Let's just go there. It is the active ingredient. So what that basically means is if you look at any sense of medicine or anything like that, there's a plethora of things that are in it, but everything has an active ingredient. Cleaning supplies, it has all these things in it, but the active ingredient is what really makes it work. And words are the active ingredient of toxicness. And you have to be aware of the toxicity of a person who has found a way to transform you back into a trauma that you did not realize you were not over. Typically, that type of a person in interactions with most is that they do not hold any validity on ownership. And everything is a matter of they need. Give them time, give them time, give them time. But if you really watch the words that are coming out of that type of person's mouth, there's absolutely nothing in the story for you. Typically, people like that in grown scenarios, and I can speak to you from that level because hopefully everyone that's watching this video is over 21. Typically, that type of a person and that interaction stems from sexual. And what do I mean by that? They screw you to death. You might say, what does that mean, Percita? Physicality in toxic relationships is always going to be a driving force to make you forget about the words. Typically, the person who has that type of personality is a very physical, sexual being. Now, you might say, oh my God, Percita, you are like going way deep. Think about it. I mean, just think about it for half of a second. They're typically in that genre of their life. And the way that they control you is through the sexuality that they bring to the table with the words of manipulation to be able to say to you, don't leave me because I've given you my all. The second thing that they use is finances. Hate to be the one to break it to you, but people like that typically are willing to buy your love. And it is a very dangerous place because, yet again, if you have been traumatized in your childhood or in other relationships that you feel as if there was not a financial distribution, meaning you were always the person who paid for everything and everything was about you, and all the pressure was on, it is also a tool for manipulation. But catch it, it started with, what did we say? Words. Because everything starts with words. Power of the tongue is in your mouth. So you cannot have a person who is able to control the interaction with you any other way than words, physicality, and finances when you're dealing with this type of person. Now, I'm going to always point out to you, what does that say about you also? Because it takes two to tango. So it's not as if just that person is toxic. You would have to identify with the toxicity of that scenario and what I just described. There has to be something within you that is attracted to it, and something within you that you find familiar. Typically, we don't want to address that because it's so much easier to point the fingers at other people and say, oh my God, so-and-so is toxic, so you need to stay away from her. True. You need to stay away from him. True. But you also have to ask yourself, as you're distancing yourself, quote unquote, What was the attraction from the beginning? What made that person or that type of person come to you? Typically, it's the fact that you also spew out that type of energy and that type of vibe, meaning that your words are also very toxic, because there is something very, very interesting about the interaction between the two. The person who does not feel that way really doesn't find themselves caught up, because they feel differently, not only about themselves and what they say to themselves and how they live within themselves, but they also do not feel as if they need to project that type of manipulation or energy onto other people. So it's easily identified. Again, unless your guard is down and you're just not paying attention. And we all have that capacity. So we always want to be very aware of the fact that we all have that capacity. But outside of that, if you can just really take the time to just think on just those few items on what I said, how much of that plays a role in your current day-to-day situations with your interactions? Because let's be real, toxic is all about power. To have anything toxic within your life is something about having power over your life or power over your circumstances. When something is toxic, it is not there to be dormant, and it is not there to be subservient. It is there to take power over you. And if you're not aware of that, it's typically when you find yourself susceptible to thinking that you are okay and you look up and you're drowning. Always remember that toxicity is a slow death. It is not something that happens instantaneously. It's not going to kill you. It's just going to wear you down and beat on you day after day. And you're going to notice that you're not yourself. And you're going to notice that things around you are just not what they should be. And you're going to look up and time will elapse. And you'll say to yourself, how in the hell did I get here? Because it is a slow crock pot type death. It is not something that you instantly see blood, or once you bump into it, you see a bruise. It weighs on you. It is slow and methodical, and you have to be conscious that that is how you get caught up, and that is how you ask yourself how 4, 5, 6, 7 years, 20 years later, you're asking yourself, how did you get here? So today, I just want you to ponder that. And like I said, this is going to be a series. So I'm going to come to you every single video with a little bit more information on how we don't necessarily have to focus on the person, but the interaction and the relationship with toxic and the person in that scenario is what you want to focus on. Because we all have the capacity to be good. And if I sit here and try to tell you that just somebody's toxic and and try to put the person down and, oh my God, you need to get away from that person, the truth of the matter is I can't convince you of that. There's nothing about me that's going to allow you to receive that, because you're going to always remember the one thing that can be good or is good in the person. But what makes that interesting is that you still have to ask yourself, how much more are you denying while trying to justify a relationship? So I'm going to leave you with just that thought. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. I greatly appreciate your time, effort, and love. You guys have been amazing. I have a new video that'll be dropping on Saturdays. That'll be for product review. Of course, we'll be running our videos on Thursday, but your liking, your subscribing, your comments, be them few or far between, I so appreciate everything about you and everything that you bring. There's a giant announcement coming. Cannot wait to bring it your way. But in the meantime and in between times, remember to live life authentic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Love you to the end. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.